Hi, YouTube. Pat Belliveau here. It is the 14th of July, 2021. This is going to be session 4, installment 4, call it whatever you want, of my audio-only series. And I thought I'd cover something. I was just thinking about this, and I thought this would be a good thing to share. You know, especially with, people who are like students who are looking to maybe pursue, or it doesn't have to be saxophone players either. It could be any instrument, pursuing a career in music, hopefully, like some sort of performance-oriented thing. And I was thinking about what I would call this, and I thought maybe I would call it, "What kind of saxophone player do you want to be?" And now, like I said, this can apply to other instruments as well, but with it, my experience being with saxophone, and that's my focus, then I'm going to kind of take it from that perspective. Remember, too, with any of these sessions that you're listening to of mine right now, I have no script. I have no point form anything or bullet points or anything like that. So I'm just doing this off the cuff. So I know one idea is going to flow into another, et cetera, et cetera. So I hope this doesn't get too long. I might have to break this up into 2 parts, depending on how far I go with this. But anyway, it's kind of a history and perspective kind of thing. And I'm going to use my situation, my history, as an example of what I mean about, for someone who's, looking to maybe, even if you're not looking to be completely professional, even if you're looking to be like semi-professional or to score gigs outside of your day gig or whatever, your day job. Thinking about what kind of saxophonist, musician do you want to be? Now, I come at it from the idea that, or the direction that, where I'm at right now, I'm 54. I've been playing sax now I started when I was 12, so it'd be 42 years. When I started taking saxophone more formally late into high school, or in high school into university, I know the kind of player that I was looking to be then. And it's funny how over my professional career, kind of what I do now and what I ended up doing over time, it kind of evolved into something else. So as much as I wanted to be a jazz player in university, and even coming out of university in my 20s, and like the thought of moving to New York in my 20s would have been awesome, but being Canadian and everything, and I would want to do it the right way, and that means green card and thousands of dollars, and so I show up in New York and I'm waiting for a month to get that $75 coffee shop gig. Meanwhile, I'm paying at the time $1,500, $1,800 a month for an apartment or something. And I thought, that would be cool to do, and that's the goal. For me, learning jazz was what I know of it, and I've studied it pretty heavily. It doesn't mean completely master it, but it's a lifelong pursuit, that's for sure. But it's really readied me for any kind of playing that I do, I find. But the thing is, as my career evolved, as I got older, I got called to do a lot of different things, and years ago, I resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to be, and I am, and I really have been when you think about it, a freelance session player, hired gun kind of thing. And I think that's the kind of saxophone playing that I thrive on the most. It's the idea that if somebody needs a saxophone for some reason, that you can be one of the people that they call on. And to me, it makes you more employable. Now, let's see, I'm going to kind of expand on this and relate this to my situation a little bit. like I said, I was in university and stuff, and I wanted to be a jazz player, blah, 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 yeah, and all that stuff. But then you get called to do, at least in my scene, I get called to do a lot of other things, party bands, big bands. Eventually I got called to play pops concerts and light classics concerts with the symphony here. Polkas. For example, my first New Year's was December 31st, 1987, going into January 1st, 1988. And it was with a singer named Buddy Knox. It was actually a country gig of all things, and I played bari sax. Now, some of you that are listening to this may be old enough to remember Buddy Knox, maybe even his biggest hit, which was "Come Along and Be My Party Doll, Come Along and Be My Party Doll," right? From the 50s, one of my parents' favorite songs. So I had known of Buddy Knox long before I actually stepped on stage with him. But, I found that, I never thought that I would be playing my first New Year's on bari sax, a country gig with Buddy Knox. But it did happen, and, I haven't done many country gigs since then. I have done a few, I will admit. But I did more party band, session work, that kind of thing, and not just straight jazz. And this is where I started to think about how my playing and what I do is evolving. And because of the fact that I listen to everything, I listen to pretty much any genre where the saxophone would fit, for one. Although I don't listen to a lot of classical saxophone, but my degree was primarily a study of classical saxophone, and classical saxophone lessons. I do like it. Some of the more modern stuff, it's like listening to avant-garde jazz. I don't really do that much. So I don't really want to listen to avant-garde classical, but I do appreciate what goes into it, because some of the stuff that music calls for is difficult to execute. So when I hear somebody play that stuff, even though it doesn't knock me out musically, I go, okay, that's pretty cool. That's not an easy thing to do. So I do have an appreciation for it. I don't have a passion for it. Let's put it that way. And to this day, I still listen to all my rock and pop and R&B and funk and Latin and all that stuff. All those, and just a huge cross section of recordings where the saxophone can fit. And I've done that the whole time, that I've been learning the instrument. And it familiarizes me with so many other possibilities of things that I can play. Now, I have never, and I will never, subscribe to any kind of jazz snob kind of thing. Now, I think jazz, studying what I have of jazz, has made me as versatile and chameleon-like when it comes to whatever I'm immersed in. But I will never, ever say that jazz is the all-being master of time, space, and dimension when it comes to music genres. I very much enjoy it. I love it. I love the improvisational part of it, that kind of a thing. But it doesn't make all the other forms of music that I listen to less valid. And I found that when I was doing session work, wow, this microphone is pretty cool. There's a yard crew cutting the grass out front of my place here, and I can hear them. Imagine that. Wow. I never knew that you could hear a fly fart at 50 paces with this microphone, but should I be surprised? No, I'm not really. Anyway, sorry about that. Just kind of was a jump to the left there. It's prepared me for many things that I do, but there's so many different ways that you could go playing the saxophone. So, I always thought that I need to know as much about the instrument and where it fits and where it sits and what it does and how it fits, blah, 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 that I can. I think that knowing those styles and knowing those things makes me more employable. And I was thinking about this the other day. You know, I've been on stage a few times, a lot of times, you know, during Christmas season and stuff, you know, and, you know, I'll be in a horn section, for example, with a singer or some singers or whatever, and there'll be charts and all that stuff. And then, you know, I'm on stage with a few other horn players, and there's been a few times where we've had, you know, younger musicians who have gone to the U.S. to study jazz, or down east, Eastern Canada or whatever, or, you know, and they're just really immersed in the whole jazz thing. And they'll be on the gig, and then, you know, we'll be playing the charts, and all of a sudden the singer will turn around and say, "Okay, guys, we're going to fake Soul Man in E. Here we go." Guitar. So they'll count it in, and the guitar goes whatever, and then we come in with ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da, right? And a lot of times, you know, these young players that come in don't know those lines. And to me, it's like, okay, but I know you can play the shit out of anything in the Omnibook, any of the Cannonball transcriptions you can find, or Coltrane or Sonny Rollins or Joe Henderson or whatever. But when it comes to actually being a jobbing player and doing a gig like this, if you're going to be on stage playing material like this, you should be checking it out, right? So, and I know, you know, I've had to spend, you know, as quick amount of time as possible, you know, turning to the, you know, one of these young players on the stage and teaching them what these lines are really quickly. And, you know, it's not always an easy thing to do, right? So, but I've been immersed in the situation where I've had to play that, or, you know, I've had to fake that line. Yeah, I know that when I started playing it for the very first time, I'm sure I buggered it up and everything, but I mean, I learned that stuff. I've internalized that so much. I've played it so much. I've listened to it so much, you know, and then inevitably a line like Bob, right? You get Sir Duke, and then, and all those lines, those are important. They're all horn feature lines, right? So it's because, you know, I've listened to those a lot. I've played in bands that play those things, but I've also played the jazz gigs too. So, you know, I had a buddy that from here that did a bunch of cruise ship work and moved to New York right after. And I kept in contact with him fairly regularly for the first while he was there. And I said, "So, man, what's it like in New York? Like, are you digging it? What are the players like?" He said, "Man, there are so many good players here." He said, "You can walk down the street and, you know, you'll all of a sudden hear this alto player in some club sounding just like Cannonball or somebody like that, you know, or Phil Woods or whatever." And then he said, "The only problem is, if I get hired to book a wedding and, you know, I hire somebody like that, I want them to play the wedding, then they just sound like Cannonball playing a wedding." He said, "That's not what I need. You know, I don't need to call Satin Doll and all of a sudden, you know, all these Cannonball lines and, you know, double time 16th figures and stuff." He said, "It doesn't call for that. The gig doesn't call for that." So there's a lot of guys that sound really great from that perspective, but they don't give me what I want when it comes to other situations. Now, would I prefer to be able to get on stage and play like some of my original jazz material, or you know, some of the old standards I really love, or arrangements of standards, or even new material that other band members write and stuff like that? Of course I would. But the thing is, how often are those gigs going to come along? Even here, the clubs that I know of that have jazz, you play for the door, and it's probably going to take you a few weeks, months maybe, before you get your date to go in and play. So meanwhile, what are you going to do? Now, a lot of my friends and colleagues teach. We teach privately. I'm lucky I have a position at Ambrose University here in Calgary, where I am, and I teach saxophone students there, and I run the jazz ensemble as well. And that helps, and my private students help. But when it comes to actual performance, you know, if I waited for any time that I was going to be able to do like the jazz gig or a jazz gig, I would never pay my rent. So I like the idea that when my phone rings, I never know what to expect. And I've been in a lot of situations where what I've listened to and what I've experienced and what I've done in these party bands and jobbing bands and stuff has helped me, to be able to go into a situation and work my way through it and not freak out about it. So case in point, in a couple scenarios, I started to become, I was kind of like, well, I guess you could call me the session saxophone player for a couple of studios in town. This would have been in the 90s. And usually I'd get a call from them, and I'd go into the studio, and usually one of two things would happen. I'd walk in, and I would see a chair or a stool. I would see a microphone, condenser mic, and on top of the chair or the stool would be a bottle of water, and that would be it. No music stand, no charts, nothing. So I would sit down and I'd say, okay. And they'd say, okay, well, we want you to do a solo from bar whatever to bar whatever in this chart. So we're going to fast forward to there. We want you to listen to the area where you're going to be playing. So I said, okay. So while they're playing that for me, I'm busy trying to figure out what key we're in, number one. Because if the person who wrote the arrangement is not there, and it's just the client and the engineer, then I have to figure it out. If the guy who's producing it is there, and a lot of times that'll happen, doesn't always, then he can give me a little bit more information. But a lot of times, many times, I didn't have anything to follow, so I had to figure it out. So this is where my ear training kicked in. And, I was ready to play to try to do an accurate solo in as many different styles as possible because I was listening to everything. And I continue to do so. And I have for the past, 35, 40 years, whatever, I've been playing this instrument, right? So I never felt that I was in trouble when knowing how to play a style. The only thing is, it was a little bit jarring at first because I didn't know, I didn't know what key we're in. Like I don't know what the chord progression is. So I have to kind of figure out a few things melodically. And then they'd say, okay, well, let's try a few takes and see what happens. So then we would do that. And I kind of, again, trying to be as chameleon-like as possible, try to fit into this scenario and then all of a sudden I'd hear things like, oh, I like that part. I like what you did there. That fits well. Okay, but this part here, let's maybe take another run at that. So I started to, as we go along, I started to get an idea from the producer or the client or whatever that whether I'm on the right track or not. So we kind of, get this vibe going and everything. But the more feedback I got from them, the better I felt about what I was doing. And then I ended up, putting together a decent kind of solo or whatever lines I had to play or whatever. Or we would just I would work with it and then say, okay, let's do a complete pass of a complete solo. So when we do that, and then hopefully, it wouldn't take long for that to come together. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is I would maybe show up and there would be the bottle of water on top of the stool, on top of the chair, whatever, and the condenser mic there. And then there would be a music stand and there would be a lead sheet with chord changes in concert pitch. Most of the time I would be called to play tenor. So this is kind of how I learned how to read chord changes up a whole step from concert pitch. So, I would see C major 7, that's D major 7 for me, of course, or E minor 7 flat 5 is F sharp minor 7 flat 5 for me. So, et cetera, et cetera. That's how that is. So it's a skill that I ended up learning out of stuff like this. See, that to me, those are practical skills. Now, if somebody was to ask me, can you play rhythm changes all 12 keys at 320 to the quarter note? I'd say, no, I can't, as a matter of fact. Can I play rhythm changes in multiple keys? Yeah. I'm not sure how many exactly. Certainly not all 12, and certainly not at 320 to the quarter note. I've never been in a situation where I've needed to have that, but I have been in a situation where I've, needed to do other things to get me through the gig. I'm not usually on gigs where we're playing rhythm changes in all 12 keys at 320 to the quarter note. Now that's a great exercise, of course, but It's not something that I've spent a metric shit ton of time on at this point, because it's not really pertinent to what I do as far as the gigs that I do, but it would be a great exercise. The fact that I know rhythm changes, I think in 4, maybe something like that, 4 keys, something like that. I wouldn't want to play them all at 3. I wouldn't even want to play rhythm changes in B flat at 320, and that's the key that's normally in. I'm at the point now where playing fast was fun in my 20s and early 30s, but now it's just, oh God, really? I just need to fasten my seatbelt and hang on, right? That's what I need to do. Is that what we're doing here? So anyway, usually nothing earth-shatteringly melodic comes out of situations like that. But anyway, I digress. Another story and another day, I guess. But anyway, so the reason why I'm just to give you kind of some examples of where I come from and some of the experiences that I've had, I just found that my playing was more towards more of a session player, hired gun, not a jazz guy. Although, like I say, a lot of gigs I do are jazz related, and that's cool by me. I have a great time doing them. But I also get called for various other things, like I was saying about, in a horn section to play, some of these R&B classics and Motown and that kind of a thing. Getting hired to back, the Temptations 3 times and Martha and the Vandellas and groups like that have come here, and knowing their material, I wasn't thrown into a situation where I wasn't familiar with the material of the person that I'm backing up. So I also come from the area that not only do I know how to read the charts that you have in front of me, if you have them, but I also know because I'm familiar with the music. I know it. I may not be completely 100% internalized, but I've heard it enough to understand the style and to know what my role is to make that go off. So one other example that I'll share with you where that's concerned was many, many years ago. This happened. There's a restaurant chain in Canada called Moxie's. I don't know if they have it in the States. It's not as common up here anymore as it used to be, but Moxie's, and I didn't know this till I showed up at the studio. I get a call to go to a certain studio here in town, and they tell me that it's a radio and TV jingle, but I don't know anything else about it. So I show up, and the engineer, he's kind of running the session, says to me, "Okay, this is a jingle from Moxie's restaurants, and they're doing a promotion, a new menu item. They're selling fajitas, and what they want is they want to use the song Tequila, but instead fajitas. So you have that da 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 fajitas instead of tequila. So of course, immediately I think to myself, okay, 50s rock sax with growl, right? So I don't know how many jazz guys would practice 50s rock sax with growl, but here's a situation where I have to be adaptable. I have to do my chameleon thing and go, okay, luckily I've been playing in bands and I'm familiar with the recording and playing in bands that play this material. And so I'm like, okay. So I had to do, what was it? 10 second stingers, 15 second, 20 second, 30 second, and then there was a 45 second or a minute thing or whatever. I can't remember exactly, but there's a bunch of different lengths, and I had to do the ba-da-da-da-da-da-da growling the whole time through. When I came out of there, my throat was starting to get raw just because I was growling pretty much the whole session. But because that's a skill that I just happened to learn kind of out of the blue. I heard I don't know if it was that particular track where I heard it, but you've probably heard the 50s rock sax before. Not always a tone that I would ever subscribe to for any reason, but I can try to recreate what they're doing, right? Because my ear is familiar with the sound because I've heard it multiple times. My parents would listen to 50s music all the time. I mean, they were in their 20s when in the 50s, right? My parents got married in 1957. So, I mean, all that stuff, that whole era, that was their stuff. So I heard that played in the house as a kid. So that stuff was familiar to me. And that's why when I started to learn jazz, I never left that other stuff. Right. And as it turns out, it's a good thing I didn't, because in a situation like that, I want to nail this thing stylistically correctly. Right. So the fact that I was drawing on what I already knew and what I already heard, my ear had heard that, so I could recreate it exactly the way I wanted to. It wasn't a case of me just being, just studying, jazz for breakfast, jazz for lunch, jazz for dinner, and not knowing how that's supposed to sound. Right. I had that idea in my head. Oh, okay. You need 50s rock sax with some growl to it. Just like, what was it? The Champs that did, I think it was the Champs that did Tequila. That was the name of the band. So you need, that kind of vibe on it. So there's an example of knowing, the stuff that I listened to, stuff that I'd heard, and being exposed to different places that the saxophone was fit into, that made sense, and that actually was something useful that I could use for a session that I was doing. So when I say, what kind of saxophone player do you want to be? I think that, again, and it could be, we could actually rename this to, what kind of musician do you want to be, I suppose, because it doesn't necessarily only have to be for saxophone players. That's not necessarily the case. It could be for whatever instrument. But from the saxophone perspective, for me, yes, I have studied jazz fairly intensely, and learned as much as I can about it. I mean, the more intimate I come with it, the better off I am, right? Because, I want to know about this music. I know it's going to be a lifelong pursuit. It's like that butterfly that's always just out of reach. You want to catch it, but just when you think you're getting your hand on it, it just flies a little bit further away, right? There's always something to learn. I know that. I get it. Even if it is rhythm changes in all 12 keys at 320 the quarter note, which, again, on the usefulness scale, I don't know where that rates exactly. I would figure pretty low, but, a neat party trick, or, be good practice, to get that down and everything, just for your own personal practice. But, I love fitting into a bunch of different things. So for me, it's not just all jazz all the time. It's not like that. It's not like that for me, right? I want to be in a bunch of different kind of scenarios. So I want to be an all-around great saxophone player as best I can, and I want to fit into as many types of scenarios as possible, because saxophone's a versatile instrument. It sounds good. It sounds good in lots of different places, not just bebop and post-bop and swing and, all the jazz-related things. It's not just that. That's a big one, though. That's a pretty wide sweeping thing. So of course that's going to be a focus to some degree. Yes, of course. But I think that, I would just as easily, man, if I had my choice of tours and things like that. If this would of course never happen in this lifetime, but if I would love to be in a situation where, for a few months I could tour with somebody like Herbie Hancock or someone like that. And then after that's done, somebody like Sting or James Taylor would call me and say, hey, come out on the road with me. I'd be like, yeah, okay. What is going on? Sorry about that. There's a lot of interesting sounds coming down from my practice room in my basement today. So don't know what that is, but anyway, sorry about that. Anyway, so yeah, this is my perspective only. I think that it's always a good thing every so often to stop and sit back and take stock of where you're at and where you want things to go. I just think that having variety for what I do just keeps things fresh for me, and I like that. I also think that I also want my playing to evolve. So any of the jazz, like the stuff that I've been writing, you'll maybe see this on my YouTube channel here, and I'll post. I'm going to be posting a few more cuts. A handful of the singles that I've released recently, none of them are swing. They're all groove oriented. So like shuffles or funk tunes or, kind of jazz rock, maybe that kind of a thing. There's no ding, jing, ding, jing, ding, jing, ding. There's none of that going on. Not that, I'm trying to leave that and never come back, or I hate it. I don't. I love swing, but it's just I'm just trying to evolve a little bit and fit into something different. And I was just kind of feeling that and hearing that, so that's why I wanted to pursue that. And I sent one of the songs I wrote to a dear friend and mentor and colleague, trumpeter Bobby Shue, who I'm sure some of you out there will know. Wonderful trumpet player. He's Bobby's old school, but man, he knows a lot of shit. He knows what he's talking about. And I sent a track to him to listen to, and I told him, I said, this is kind of where things are going for me, and I'm just going to follow it. I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to go with it. And he got back to me and he said, he said, absolutely. He said, don't question what you're doing. If that's what you're hearing, just follow it. We second guess ourselves way too much. And it was nice to hear him validate that, because I was like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't know why I'm going in this direction, but I'm actually kind of digging it. So there again, my situation, I'm kind of evolving into something else. What am I turning into? A fusion player? Am I turning into a smooth jazz player? What am I doing? I have no idea. I'm just writing the music that I'm feeling and hearing, and I'm recording it and I'm releasing it. That's it. I don't want to necessarily put all these labels and parameters and stuff on it. It's just me right now. This is Pat in July of 2021, 54 years old, doing what he's doing. Maybe in a year or two, it's going to be different. I have no idea. I have no idea where this is going to go, and maybe we'll go nowhere. I don't know. But it's already been kind of cool. So, it's the evolution of my journey. That's what it is. So, I urge, any of the young people out there that are listening, and you don't have to be saxophone players, whatever you're listening, whatever your instrument is, and whatever you're playing, whatever. Think about what you might want to do for your career. Do you want to just be a jazz player? I can't see myself just doing that. I don't think there's enough work to go around for that to happen. I mean, unless you hook up to a worldwide festival circuit that is going like 10 or 11 months of the year, which, there's festivals happening all over the world at any given time. But there again, do you want to live out of a suitcase all the time? Because that's what you'll do. If that's the case, if you're talking to Pat in his 20s, he'd be like, oh, hell yeah, I'll do that. Sure. But you're talking to Pat in his 50s now, and that's not so much where I'm thinking, would I still do touring, light touring and stuff? Yeah. I don't think I'd want to be away from home for months and months and months on end, unless it's so lucrative that I can't say no. And that's just not happening right now. But, light touring for me, a few weeks at a time here and there, that would work for me. Sure. I'm still okay with that. I can still travel. And I might as well still do it if it's possible, until such a time as I can't anymore. But I enjoy doing all the other stuff, all the other session stuff, being able to, put me in a horn section, put me in a big band, call me to play in a jazz quartet, book me for the symphony, polka gigs, country gigs. I don't care what. If it's not the kind of music I enjoy playing, or I don't want to do the gig, I'll say no. But, up until then, all these things that I get to do, I just feel that I look at the jazz, I'll call them jazz. I know it's a kind of a derogatory thing. I'll say jazz snobs, purists, maybe we'll say. I look at the jazz purists and I go, okay, God bless you. Go ahead, do that. It might be a long and winding road for you. And then over on the other side, where I'm doing a little bit of that, a little bit of rock, a little bit of R&B, a little bit of horn section, I like the idea of somebody coming to town and calling, like I said, I did the Temptations. I was called for Gino Vanelli, but unfortunately couldn't do it. But there's another example, B.J. Thomas. Who else? Oh, Colin James. Canadians will know Colin James. He's more R&B and blues and stuff. Groups like that will come in, or somebody like that will come in. Martha and the Vandellas, I mentioned them before. I enjoy that stuff too. I mean, I love that kind of music as well. So why would I shy away from that? I don't want it to just be, just jazz stuff all the time. But I mean, I'll do as much of that as I can. So anyway, I've done a lot of thought on what kind of saxophone player am I and what do I want to be? I'm not a jazz purist. I'm not. I do dig it, and I play a lot of it. I try to play as much of it as I can because it's challenging, and I enjoy that challenge. But it's not the only thing that I subscribe to, and it's not the only thing I want to be involved in. So I've kind of resigned myself to the fact that I'm a hired gun session player that tries to fit into as many different scenarios musically as possible. And it's my challenge to be that chameleon and to deliver whatever it is that the client or the band leader wants. One of my people ask me, what are some fun gigs you did? One of the funnest gigs I ever did, and I've told people this, and this goes back a ways. And funny enough, in Calgary here, we have a big rodeo fair kind of thing. I'm sure you've probably heard of, called the Calgary Stampede. It's dubbed the greatest outdoor show on earth. This year, it's probably half or less than half of what it normally is because of the fact that we're the COVID pandemic and it's just kind of on its way out, sort of. I don't know. If you ask my opinion, which you didn't, but if you did, I would tell you. You like how I did that? See what I did there? I don't think they probably should have had it this year, but they decided to anyway, and whatever. It's not my decision to make. But so anyways, I bring this up because many years ago during the Stampede, which happens in July of 1992, a trombone player, friend and colleague from here who moved away and unfortunately has passed away long ago, called me to play Barry sax with the Canadian rock group Lighthouse at the Stampede. They were coming in to do 2 days worth of shows. And it was one of the funnest gigs I've ever done. And I'm the youngest of four. And my oldest brother and my sister, they had Lighthouse recordings. And I remember those songs as a kid, them playing them. I'd never asked, who that was or anything like that because I'm, too busy being a kid, right? So I wasn't concentrating on things that intently at the time. But then we got together at a community center here in town to rehearse before doing the show. And they would call a tune and I'd call it up on my charts and then they would count it off and then I'd start playing my lines. And it's like, holy shit, this is you guys? Really? Because I remember hearing these songs on the radio. This would have been like early mid-70s, and I would have been in elementary school at that time. But I remember hearing these songs in the house on the radio because, again, like I say, my oldest brother and sister would play these things. And then they'd count off another. I'm like, holy shit, this is you guys too? You're kidding. This is you guys. Because I remember hearing these songs over and over again. So I was like shaking my head going, wow. This is you guys. That is so freaking cool. And now I'm on stage with you guys. I don't believe it. So it was kind of cool that way. So yeah, I mean, and as I tell people, that's one of the funnest gigs I ever did. The guys were so great and the crowd was just going apeshit. A lot of that vintage, I guess they would be 50s, 60s now who used to listen to that. When they were popular, I think their heyday was around 1971, 72. In 1972, I was 5. So, I didn't know as much about. But again, the music, I heard it and I started playing my line. I'm like, I just fit into that right away because I was so familiar with that music because it was played all the time in my house, right? And on the radio, I heard it all the time. And I'll leave you with one other thing. It's a story that I actually typed up on Facebook. And people said, you should write a book of chronicling some of the stories that you're sharing with us. And I thought, that's just too much typing. I don't want to do that. So I set up, you'll see on my YouTube channel here, there's a bunch of videos that I've shared those stories because I wanted to document them. I just didn't want to spend all the time typing them. So I did document them, and they're on my channel as videos. So there's a little bit of, I'm going to do a little bit of crossover here. One of the videos is, the subject matter is what I'm going to share with you right now. And again, this talks about the ability to be able to jump into a situation and just deal with it as best you can as a hired gun. Totally unexpected, and sometimes this is how the business works, and how, shit happens on gigs, right? We know that. I mean, you guys that have done gigs, who knows what could happen, right? So anyway, here's the situation. I was a member of the Calgary, again, talking about the Stampede. Calgary Stampede has a thing each night called the Grandstand Show. And there's a big outdoor grandstand. I think it holds, I don't know, I think probably around 18,000 people, something like that. And the average crowd you'd get on a night is probably between 16 and 17,000. It wasn't always a complete sellout. So I would say it's probably, 16-ish, between 16 and 17. And happens every night. The Stampede runs for 10 days. And each night there's a show and there's fireworks at the end and all that. So I'm part of the Grandstand Orchestra. I was from 1993 till 2009, I think it was. And then there was a one-off in 2018 that I got hired for, and a bunch of my colleagues that were in the Grandstand Show with me from 93 to 2009. So this was sometime, I think, late 90s, early 2000s. We had a kind of a comedian named Wally Eastwood. And Wally had a thing he put on the stage. It looked like a piano keyboard. It was fake. It was a tone generator. It was a slab of wood painted, and it had a foam. There was foam on top of it, painted to look like a piano keyboard. So he took some rubber balls, and the balls would hit the tone generator, and it would generate a tone, obviously. So at one part in the show, our guitarist, a fellow by the name of Russ Broom, who's an awesome guitarist, producer, worked with Jan Arden, another Canadian music icon, for about 16 years. And Russ is a mother guitar player and just a great guy. And he's supposed to go out and do the dueling banjos thing with Wally, from Deliverance, right? All that kind of stuff. So Wally starts it off, and then Russ answers and everything. And Russ has a wireless pack for his guitar. So he puts it on his belt, and, he's got the battery pack and blah, blah, blah. So he can walk out on stage. There's no wires or anything like that. So it's all good. And, we were doing that for the first few nights. And then one night he goes down from, we're up in the set on, there's a stage, and then there's a set in behind the stage, and we go up some stairs, and there's a cubby hole where the whole band sits, and we have microphones. We're mic'd in through the sound system and everything. So I'm up there probably I'm right at the very back, in this cubby hole, right in one of the little cubby holes within a cubby hole, sitting next to the trumpets, telling jokes probably or something. And, so Russ goes out, he gets up from his place in the cubby hole, goes down onto the stage, and he's trying to get his guitar going, and it's not working. It's not going at all. And they're trying hard to get it going, and I'm just busy talking to the trumpet player next to me. We're telling jokes and stuff, right? And then our contractor conductor is named Sam Latvia, turns to me, like we can tell there's a problem, nothing's going on. Right? There's silence, and they're trying to get this guitar working, because what had happened was the pack is supposed to be charged at the end of every night. And whoever was in charge of that, I guess, failed to put the pack into the charger. So when Russ put it on his belt, it was already drained. So there was no power left. So I'm sitting there telling jokes with my trumpet player colleague next to me, and then all of a sudden I hear my name. I hear Sam go, "Pat, get down there." And I turn and I look at Sam Latvia, and I'm like, I go, "Yeah, right. Okay, sure. Whatever, man." So then I go back and start talking to my trumpet player friend again, and we're telling jokes and stuff. and blah, blah, blah. And then we tell a joke and have a laugh. And then I just, kind of look straight ahead of me then. And I turn to my left where Sam's standing on the podium, and he's still staring at me. And he's like, "What are you still doing here?" And I said, "Are you serious?" He said, "Yes." I said, "You want me to go down there?" And I'm playing baritone sax. I said, "You want me to go down there and play dueling banjos on baritone sax with Wally Eastwood?" He goes, "Yes, I do." I'm like, "Oh my God, you're kidding." "Okay, all right, sure." So I trucked my cookies down the stairs onto the stage. And of course, I've seen the movie Deliverance. I know the whole da-la-na-na-na-na-na. I walk over, Wally said, and I already knew this because I just knew because of our rehearsals and stuff. Wally says, "We're in the key of C concert." I'm like, "Yep, got it." And he says, "Okay, I'm going to start us off." And then the show producer, Bill Avery, comes up, and he's got a handheld mic that he's got right on like at the edge of my bell, so I can be heard through the PA system. So Wally starts us off and does the ba-da-da-da-da, and I answer him, right? Because I've heard this. I mean, it's a pretty simple line and everything. And then he goes, and I answer him, and then he does the ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and then I just start improvising. And he's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing. It's kind of fitting in. We're just all over the place. And then he goes, "Okay." He says, "Give me an ending." So now, to understand this ending I gave him, baritone saxophone players will know this. Baritone sax, in the key of concert C, it's at the key of A for bari sax. The lowest note on a bari sax, on the new ones, not the vintage horns, but on the new ones, is a low A. It's the lowest note on the instrument. So I just saw this opportunity. The heavens opened and the angels spoke to me and said, "Give them a low A, right up their keister." So I just took the biggest gulp of air I could and just shot a low A right into and the air came up right out my bell and smacked into that microphone that Bill Avery was holding. And it just vibrated the whole grandstand. It was a beautiful thing. It was awesome. I've waited a lifetime for something like that to happen, so I took advantage of it as best I could. And Wally turned to me and said, "That's not an ending." And I thought to myself, "Oh, hell yes, it is." And then he did a little thing, and then whatever. And then there was the last chord, and I think I played the last note on a chord or whatever. He came over, shook my hand, and then Bill shook my hand, and I went up. I went back up the stairs, back into the little cubby hole. I sat down. Sam Latvia took $40 cash out of his pocket, handed it to me. And I said, "Man, why did you have me go down there and do that?" He said, "I just knew that if I sent you down there, something would happen. And something needed to happen because the show had come to a screeching halt." I said, "Okay, man, you got me. But thanks for the $40. So, the idea of just being able to jump into a situation and figure out what's going on as quickly as possible and, keep going with it. And, that's because I'd done that so many times being a freelance player. It wasn't a big, even if it was in front of 16,000 people, it still wasn't a big deal because I was used to doing that because so many times I'd had to fit into situations where you just never know what to expect. Right. So this wasn't a big deal to me. So it was actually kind of fun. A little bit weird at first, but I look back now and kind of, I still chuckle at it, I guess. It was kind of funny, but anyway, so again, just to wrap this up and tie it all together in a neat little bow. I've kind of thought about, where I'm going with my career and the kind of player that I've evolved into and where am I evolving from here or whatever's going on. And I kind of look at myself and I go, I think I like the idea of being a session player who's able to improvise, who's able to fit into a lot of different scenarios. And basically, I can do that straight ahead jazz gig or the big band thing or the horn section, or I can back up Martha and the Vandellas or the Temptations or whoever else, blah, blah, blah. Johnny Mathis was another one. Same thing. I did a show of his as well. And someone kind of not quite on a different spectrum, but also One that I was in a horn section for, I was asked to book the horn section for, was Clarence Clemens and the Temple of Soul. Clarence Clemens was, as I'm sure you all know, Bruce Springsteen's former saxophone player before he ended up passing away. And he had a band of his own called the Temple of Soul, and man, could that band groove. But it's probably one of the loudest gigs I've ever done. That was for the Calgary Blues Festival. So at McMahon Stadium here in town, which is where our CFL, Canadian Football League team, the Calgary Stampeders, play. Anyway, so yeah, I think this is, I just want to kind of get this down and offer this. Oh God, we're almost at an hour now. I better shut up. Just offer, this kind of thing for some of the younger players, that are thinking about maybe doing a career in music, whatever instrument, doesn't have to be saxophone. Think about what kind of stuff you want to do, and then gravitate towards that. Again, too, with saxophone, it fits into so many different places. To only listen to jazz, I think is wrong. I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I went to university with some people who just wanted to concentrate on classical saxophone because they wanted to get their master's and doctorate and then end up teaching at a college or university. And I used to say to them, and, whether they took this advice to heart or not, I'm sure a lot of them didn't, but I used to say to them, you know what? I said, when the time comes, because it's going to be not going to be a case of if, it's going to be a case of when, that one or some of your students comes to you and says, hey, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, can we do some jazz stuff today? What are you going to tell them? I don't know any. Sorry. I don't play that stuff. Sorry. Really? You're not going to be like that, are you? Acknowledge that the instrument is versatile and expose your students to everything, to all of that stuff. Just to pigeonhole into, and this is the same with the jazz guys too. Purists, snobs, whatever you want to call them. The saxophone is a versatile instrument. Open up your mind to all that it can do and everywhere that it can fit. It's not just all about jazz all the time. It's not, right? So whether you want to do that with your career is up to you. But I don't think you're going to be as employable as someone who's, well, like in my situation where I want to be a session player. I want to do everything I can with the instrument and fit into as many different places as I can. I think that's the most fun, for one, and I think that makes you employable the most. My 2 cents plus GST. My YouTube channel, my opinion. There you go. Anyway, fire me off some comments. You can put them right on the YouTube channel here, but I do have this email address, youtube@belltones.ca, youtube at belltones, belltones.ca. And, feel free to jot some comments down on the channel here itself, or send me an email at YouTube. And I'll, whatever you have to say, I'll address those comments. I'll read them on my next one and say, here's some comments from the last time. Or if you have some suggestions for other topic ideas, send them along. I'd be curious to know, other players, your experiences. Are you a session player? Are you a jazz guy? Do you want to just be a rock guy? Whatever. There's no wrong answer here as far as I'm concerned. It's just, you want to do what you want to do. You hear it that way. That's your journey. So go down that road, whatever that road is, just, always do the music justice and, always work with integrity, Don't be a jiver. Take the music seriously. It's the most important thing. There's nothing more important than the music. If you're a musician, there's nothing more important than the music and doing it right. So whatever you choose to do it right. Lend as much credence and give it as much justice as possible, right? Be true to it, because that's the most important thing. Yeah. Anyway, I'm getting all zen and deep on you now. Okay, I'm going to exit stage left, and I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this. I hope it wasn't too long. We're at just about 55 minutes now by the looks of it. Boy, when you get me on the right subject, man, can I babble. Did you notice that? Yeah, so anyway, I hope you all are doing well. I hope you're all COVID free and craziness free and everything as well, and that you're supporting music. Music needs your help right now, especially live music, considering basically you could hear crickets for the last 16 months or so. And I think the arts may be one of the last industries to get on its feet again, but it's going to need some help. So if you get a chance, support artists, support live music, all that you can. And just have fun. That's what it's for. Music's there to have fun. It doesn't need to be any kind of competition or weirdness. Let's just enjoy it. Okay. Take care, all. Bye for now.